Welcome to The Tripod, the official podcast of San Clemente High School. I'm your host, Jay Bish. With graduation a couple weeks away, I've got two alums on the show today that are absolutely worth your time. Grant Kelsay, Jason Keany. We're talking life after high school, creativity, and everything in between on this episode of The Tripod. So I'm curious because this is the time of year where especially seniors are reflecting like crazy on all 4 years. And one of the big topics is being prepared for the real world after graduating high school. Now that you've been out of high school for a couple of years, do you feel like anything in high school prepared you for it?
I mean, it's definitely like different in the way that I don't know, it's the real world, like it's not like a high school classroom, but I think things that just let me do kind of whatever I wanted or ways that I could kind of feel like I was pushing boundaries a little bit definitely prepared me because it kind of gave me that like spontaneity and just being able to figure things out for myself.
Yeah, I also feel like it really depends on what you do after high school. Like if you go to a different state for school, it's going to be totally different. But in my case, I just went up to Saddleback, and that's like an extra 15-minute drive. So it honestly like feels not so different. It's kind of weird. It just feels like it just kept going. Obviously, the classes got harder, but yeah.
It feels like an extension of high school at Saddleback?
Yeah, it kind of does in a way.
Is that a good thing? Does that help in terms of like it's a natural progression, or does it detract from like potential growth?
I think that you still have a lot of opportunity to grow just because you're more independent. Like at this point, you're probably more independent at this point just because you're choosing your own classes, you're doing your own thing, you're trying to figure out like what major you want to do. So you definitely have that independence there.
That's awesome. Jason, you were talking about like things that you were a part of in high school. Can you talk about anything in particular that you did while you're in high school that helped you prepare for the real world?
Yeah, I think the ones that helped the most were definitely like ASB is like one of the biggest because I think I found like originally I joined ASB because I was just like I looked at the list of things I could do and I was like tech like that I have the best chance of getting in. There's 5 people that do tech, so I just went for that, and then I figured out I really like video editing, and like that kind of led one thing to another, and here I am. But I think classes like that, like newspaper, where it's just like, what do? You just make up your own like role basically. What were some other classes? Just like random electives that I took, and I just got to like I don't think like my English classes really were like, oh, like that's really important for me. I think it was more of the creative ones where I kind of got to decide and like make my own projects basically.
And you mentioned in ASB, like I think when you were here at least, you really helped reimagine pep rallies and just like things that were going on campus that were ASB sponsored, or at least the brainchild of ASB. Can you talk a little bit about what you did and what you learned through that process?
Yeah, so I think if I remember correctly, what I brought to that is I kind of brought more like production value. So we added like kind of cooler lighting, better flow of show, even some like multicam broadcast like stuff. And I think a lot of that was inspired from when I was working at Capo Beach Church during high school. I was seeing all that in like real world production, and I was looking at the tools we had in high school, and I was like, we can totally do something that's on par with like what real world production is doing. And I tried to bring it back to high school and kind of put my own spin on it. So it was really cool for me because I got to do that with like very little consequence. I could just try things out, and it really didn't matter if it messed up.
Is that for both of you? Like, because I know Grant, like you with being in video too, sort of the same thing. Is that necessary, you think, in allowing kids to experiment? Is just knowing that, oh, if I try this and I'm not going to fail for it, like, are you willing to push the boundaries more?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like having those creative classes where I think the classes where you're not graded on the final product, but more of just like trying are super important. Just in that way, it's like, yeah, you tried it, you might not be the best at it, but as long as like you're having fun and you're like putting forth your best effort, like that's the most valuable part of those classes for sure.
Yeah, I took a class last semester when COVID first started in college, and it was called visual thinking. And the first day of class, the guy's like, "I'm not grading anything. Like, you don't have to do any of this." But it was one of my favorite classes because it was like, I don't have to do any of this. So kind of everything is like my own take on it, my own spin. So every project he assigned, I was just like, this is kind of cool because I can like, put as much or as little effort as I want. And like that kind of freedom, I ended up putting more effort than the classes where things were required.
Why is that, you think? Why is it the less requirement like breeds more effort in your case?
I think for me at least, I like to just think outside the box. And so I think when the box is very narrow and like it's very one size fits all for any assignment or project, it gets really stale and boring for me. But the ones where it's like, I have a chance to be kind of different than what my classmates are doing, it's kind of fun. So it's kind of fun figuring out how I can do that.
That's awesome. Grant, I remember in video, like you and Cole especially were doing a lot of, the editing, shooting, all that kind of stuff. What is it for you in terms of having less requirements that makes you want to work harder?
Kind of along the same thing. When you don't have requirements, there's no like baseline, so you can really just go crazy with it. Like you're not shooting for just like the bare minimum because there is none. So you can really just, there's just a lot of room for like creative interpretation with that kind of stuff.
That's super cool. Jason, I want to talk to you about the 20 hot stuff because I feel like that was for a little bit of time at school. I know Mr. Reed has his feelings on stickers.
Yeah, big fan. Yeah. Yep.
But at that time, I felt like it had this 4 to 6 month like giant source of interest. What inspired you and Josh Green to start 20 Hot? And let's just take it from there.
Yeah, so the thing that started it genuinely, Josh went and got wings at a restaurant called 20 Hot. And he just thought this would be the coolest band name ever. So he bought the domain and then came to me the next day and was like, dude, I bought a domain. What do I do with it? And I was like, okay, this is a really cool opportunity to like make something. So I was like, let's make a website and just start putting stuff on there. So we made a website, and Josh, he's totally like, this, whatever I'm doing is life-changing. And this is absolutely revolutionary. And so he was like, let's just make a revolutionary website where kids just write whatever the heck they want. And they could just post it. And it's like very little like editorial stuff. We were both in newspaper at the time. And then from there, it kind of took on its own life. And, kids would just be like, oh, I want to write for your website. And they'd author stuff. And these are kids who like don't even like writing. They would write the worst articles and we would just put them up. And then they would start to like actually try because they're like, oh, anything goes. So I'll just try something cool. So it kind of did that, and we just let people do what they wanted, and it turned out to be a pretty big thing. We had like 40 plus authors and about 6 like editors who were just managing the website for us at one point in time.
That's awesome, dude. What did you learn through that experience?
I learned that kids will just write about whatever when you say whatever, I think one of my favorite articles was just like, does Wyoming exist? And it was actually this really like thought out piece about like, just like, is it real? I've never been there, and like super long. And I was just like, I can't believe someone wrote this and thought about this for like an hour. But it was awesome.
That is really cool. I think it's neat too how that dovetails in with what you've all been talking about, in terms of giving people space to create, and when they have that chance, they're going to do some really cool stuff. Like even the people, like you said, that came in there and wrote some stuff that was pretty suspect, but then realized like, oh, this is going to go up there. People are going to read this. Now I want to try a little bit harder, because since I've been here, there's been like a lot of zines that have been trying to be produced, but what was so neat about that was it just felt so organic and authentic, and people really took to it for that like spring semester, I feel like, and some. So I think it's cool that you guys allow people to have that platform to just be themselves,
Yeah.
I think what's really neat about both of you guys, you talked a little bit about like how you're working in the church and stuff. What are some things you both pulled from that experience? Like what is working there taught you in terms of creativity, expression, any of that?
Well, I think for me, the thing that I've learned the most is actually what I've pulled from other experiences. So I worked at Cloud9 for about 9 months, And in that time, I just was pumping out videos, like editing like multiple videos a week. And this was during like the height of COVID. So it was literally like online class, online work, class work, all in one day. And I think going from that to like this, where it's more like, it's less specific, where it's like you're not just editing a video that someone else is telling you like what exactly to do, and like there's 5 different note passes and then finally the final product. It's more of like, you know, what do you want to add to this? How do you want to make this like special? And, you know, do what you want to do to like put your own flair on it and make it cool for everyone watching.
I was actually going to say the exact same thing. Like, especially with the creative classes really prepared me for where I'm at right now, because I do graphic design, and you're always like pulling inspiration from other things. But as soon as you get like strict guidelines for what it has to be, then you just like all of your creativity goes away because it's like so restricted. So yeah, I think like the classes I took in high school, especially the film or the video production class, especially like really opened up like a lot of opportunities now, because I'm like able to think a little bit more abstractly.
That's awesome. Do you think, because I love what you said there, Grant, about like how some of the classes helped you, but I get the sense that both of you inherently have that gear. Like you guys have both somehow been creative, or at least seen things differently than other people for a lot of your lives. Where does that come from? Is that like your parents? Is that other outside experiences other than school? Like, where do you think you first began to realize that you could make creative stuff?
That's a really good question, because my parents and my brother are like not the same way at all. They're very like, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but they're rule followers. Like they do exactly like what they're told, like, and they do it well, but just very specifically. Whereas I guess me and Jason, we just kind of do things kind of according to what we think is the right way to do things.
So would you grant that like the way that you are is maybe like a reaction?
Yeah, I feel like that's a good explanation for that. Just kind of seeing that and being like, well, I don't know if I want to do it that way, and just kind of going about it a different way.
That's cool. Jason?
Yeah, for me, I really don't know. I think honestly, I think it was just the people I was surrounded in during high school, and like the teachers I had that were so willing to just like let me try things. Like I said, like ASB, newspaper, and like just those classes that I got bored in, I think were the ones that I found like things that I could keep myself entertained with. So like, you know, I would sit in my world history class and I would think about things that I could do in my other class. And I think that's kind of what that boredom really made me creative in places where I was allowed to be.
That's cool. Can you all think of ways that high school could tweak itself so that, even though I think, you know, it's cool, I think when your mind can wander, you tend to have really cool creative thoughts. So it's cool that some of your classes allowed for that time. But like, could you think of ways that, now that you've been out of the game for a couple of years in terms of high school, like what could high school classrooms, how could they be reimagined to allow other kids to succeed more versus just kind of being bored?
Well, it's tough, I think, because there's like self-starters, and then there's people that are just there. And I think I'm kind of experiencing a lot of just being there now that I'm in college, and I kind of want to just be done. So I kind of understand what it's like for those kids in high school that were just like not doing anything and just being in class trying to get it over with. So I think it's tough to like accommodate both those groups of people. But I think finding ways to do a little bit of both, where, you know, you have some very structured things that some people really like because the guidelines are very clear, and then having some things that aren't very clear and you have to make up for yourself, can help kind of keep both groups interested.
Yeah, I'd say we were kind of talking a little bit earlier, Bish, about how there's a new IB class for film.
Yeah.
I think classes like that are super important, because those kids that wouldn't typically take a creative class now can, because it fulfills their like IB requirements. So I think just having more creative classes available for more people to kind of take it into their own hands to decide what they want to take would be super invaluable.
That's a great point. Because I mean, I think when I think about it off the top of my head, like I think there's only about 30 units or 30 credits you have to get for electives. And then there's close to like 100, almost 200 that you have to get for like core classes. So if you feel like that was split a little bit differently, that could help.
Yeah, definitely.
That's super cool. Grant, one of the things I thought was really cool about your notes was the way that you talked about the inspiration that you get from nature. Is that all about like just being unplugged from like life? Is that like, how does nature find a way to inspire you?
Yeah, so one thing, I guess Jason and I both have, we've really been into camping, especially during lockdown, just because it's just like just getting out there, like getting away. And I think that especially has been super helpful just because I don't want to say like you're exposed to so many like new things, but it's kind of what it is. Like we usually don't really have a plan when we go out there. We have like kind of a basic idea, but just going out there and experiencing just like nature and just I guess like yeah, unplugging has been like super helpful. And then literally like the next week I go back to work and I have all these like really cool ideas.
So it is just about like letting your mind have some space.
Yeah, exactly.
That's rad. So you guys are a couple years away from being out of college. I know you guys have the awesome gig right now at church. What do you envision down the road for yourselves? Like, where do you guys want to be in a few years?
I don't know. I thought I had it all figured out last year. I thought I was going to just take it all the way in the esports industry and be running like the world broadcasts in about 5 years. But I think coming back to this and realizing how much more freedom I have in this role than I do, in esports where I thought I had a lot of freedom, I'm kind of stuck because I'm like, like what do I do? What do I do? Because now I have this job that I actually really like and I can kind of do what I want and kind of define my own role, or I can go back to this like a little bit cookie cutter like job where it's like it's cool and it's a unique experience, but I don't get to have as much say in like what projects I'm making.
Yeah.
Well, what do you value the most?
I think I value creating my own projects because I think I do work way better when it's a passionate work and it's things that I'm excited about than when it's things that I'm being told to do. Which sounds really young and angsty, but there is like I feel like hopefully a little professionalism in there.
Do you value money? Like, does that come into the conversation at all that you have, inner monologue and all that?
I mean, absolutely. Like I'd love to, live and survive and live comfortably. But I think my parents have raised me my whole life saying like if you can make buttloads of money and not be happy. And I think I've seen it in people around me, especially here in Orange County. I mean, people are filthy rich here, but a lot of them aren't that happy. And I've seen that. And I think kind of when I was in esports, like that industry right now is very underpaid, but I'm seeing people do things that they love. And it's so like refreshing to see that because they're so much more enthusiastic about life.
That's awesome. What about you, Grant?
Yeah, so even though I'm like doing graphic design right now, I couldn't stand the thought of having like a graphic design job just because of kind of what Jason was saying. Like as soon as it's your job, it takes all like career, it takes all the fun out of it. Like as soon as you're supposed to be creative, it just doesn't like work very well for me. So I'm actually studying computer science right now. And hopefully I can land a career somewhere in that field. But in a way, it's still kind of creative just because you can still like design your own. This is going to sound super nerdy, but you can like design your own algorithms and like software and stuff. So I think that's just enough to like tickle my creative nerves still.
Well, I think it's interesting when you say like, I love doing graphic design, but I don't want to have it be my job. Instead, I want to do this. What is it about that world that makes you go, oh, I can get paid for this and do this and be happy with it?
Yeah, I just think because like, I don't know, growing up, I've kind of been surrounded by technology. My dad has a job in IT, so I'm very like comfortable with it. And like I was saying, I feel like I'm very split because I do have like the analytical brain as well as like the creative side. And I think that's like a perfect like marriage of the two because one, like you're doing something very practical, but on the other hand, you're still designing stuff from scratch.
That's cool. I don't know much about that stuff. Like, where can you take that? Like, what does that world look like as a full-time job?
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities in the computer science world from like data analysis to software engineering to cybersecurity. I'm more drawn to like the software engineering and like software development just because of that reason. Like you're designing something from scratch, and it'll have like a practical use.
That's cool. My last thing for you guys, in terms of work in the future and stuff like that, how important is a work-life balance to you?
Yeah,
Very important.
I figured it out the hard way when I was working at Cloud9. I mean, it was remote work, so it reminded me of homework. That's what it reminded me of, because they would assign stuff at the beginning of the week and you'd have like this group of projects to finish. And, you'd have to get them done by the end of the week. And I would always cram on Friday and just be like, oh no, like I need to do all these videos, and it would be miserable. And so, but also during the week, I'd have all these other projects because they're constantly messaging you on Slack and stuff. So I was so drained, and I just felt like so wiped. But then I had this weird like, oh, but it's such a cool opportunity. Like it's okay to be doing this now. But I think getting in the habit of like putting like distance between your job when you're trying to like just enjoy life a little bit is okay. But it's also hard to do that like when you feel like you should be spending your whole life doing work.
Yeah.
Are you made to feel that way? Like people your age, do you feel like sorry to cut you off, but like, are you guys made to feel that way? You think the way you came up, that you should be?
I think a little bit. I mean, it's like in jobs where it's like very tough to get them. I think like people tell you like, oh, you're so lucky to have that job. Like I wish I had that job. And it's kind of similar to getting into like a big school. It's like, oh, you're so lucky to be in that school, so you spend your whole life studying when you're at college. And I mean, that's not really what it's for. It's just to like help educate you and help you along in your career. So I don't know. Yeah, I think we are a little bit raised to just put our whole life into whatever the work is that we have.
Yeah.
Great.
I definitely think that people are like geared towards like there's like a list of things you have to do. It's like go to school, go to college, get a job, and like there's no room for like I want to say like self-improvement or like self-reflection, because you're just like going from one thing to another. So I think having that like life and as well as like career, like it doesn't have to be like right after another. I think if you take time just to like enjoy where you're at right now and like stop thinking towards the future, like you'll get there eventually. You might as well like enjoy the time you have until you get there.
That's awesome, guys. So do you make a conscious effort to do things that bring about enjoyment? Is that, I mean, it's on the tip of your tongues, I feel like, or on your mind at least, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the camping.
Yeah. I think
4x4.
I think camping has really been the thing we've enjoyed doing recently.
And it makes it a lot easier too, because since our work is mostly like on like technology, like on computers or like dealing with technology, when like we can't touch it or we're out of cell service or we can't like be at all involved in that world, it makes it so much easier to just like be like, okay, well, I can't even if I wanted to, so let me just like enjoy what I'm doing now.
When you first started going camping, did you ever have any of those like panic attacks of, oh my God, what if they need me right now kind of a thing? Or did you allow yourself to go out there and just say, okay, look, we're gonna go out, we're gonna have no service, and we're just gonna deal with it? Like, how'd that work for you mentally?
I think a little bit like going camping or planning it, I was like, oh gosh, like I really hope, they don't need me when I go. But I think once I was there, I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do. So like, let's just stop worrying about it. And there's enough problems when we camp because we don't plan very much. And that's on purpose so that we can really be there. Like, for example, what was once we went camping and we've been trying to do this kind of off-road thing. I drive a Jetta, he drives a Tiguan, and off-roading is not easy for us. But like, so we woke up one morning, we're planning on leaving and we get stuck in the dirt and I'm like, we can't move my car. So I think like things like that make it so that you're very present in the moment, because if you're not going to be able to leave. So I think that for me is definitely a way to take my mind off of work.
Yeah, definitely.
For more episodes of The Tripod, check out sctripod.com.